Okay, so hello everyone again. Welcome to KSSP Podcast. My name is Spencer,
And I'm Katie.
and this is Wednesday. It's a Wednesday episode. So on Wednesdays, we're gonna kind of focus on what I like to consider healing in a way, but just kind of like mental health and those kind of topics or things that kind of pertain to that. So, what we decided to do for this first episode is that I have a deck, which I don't have the full deck on me, but it's an ACT deck. So, what we did was chose a card. We went with an open card for this week's episode. For this one, we did pull it, I think today or two ago. So, we did have the prompt before, so we're had time to think about the prompt and kind of determine what that means to us. But I think the next time we do it, we'll draw the card when we record so that you can kind of see it's more raw that way, I guess. But for this one, for this card, we got give forgiveness, and then I'll just kind of read it. So, what it said on the card was bring to mind someone you care about. Imagine them making a mistake or perceived misstep. And then how might you show them you understand they are imperfect without criticizing or attempting to get even? And then what would that mean to them? So for me, when I first drew this card and was trying to think about it, it was hard for me to think of like a person that I could think of for forgiveness. Granted, I have people in my life, obviously, but trying to think of someone that could do something that would upset me to where I would have to think of forgiveness for them was hard. So the one person that I thought of course, was Katie over here. And I was trying to think of what is it that she could do, and then like what I thought was just if she wasn't prepared for like one of our episodes or something so small that it really doesn't matter. Because it was hard for me to think of what I would not be able to forgive someone for. And then that made me think of a time when, so then for me, I thought it was important because it's asking what would forgiveness mean to said person. And for me, I think it was really important. And I think it's really important for everyone that we understand from our perspective before we can understand from someone else's perspective. So for me, I had to think there was a time back when I was in college that Katie and then one of our other friends was visiting me, and I was living in a house and they were at someone else's house party. We were supposed to be hanging out. Eventually they came over and I was just super upset. Granted, there was alcohol involved, but I was still upset. And instead of doing probably the adult thing in that scenario and having a discussion, like just talking and explaining about like that I was upset, I instead blew up at them. I don't remember details exactly, but it just thinking back, obviously it was definitely uncalled for and not appropriate. So what I had to do, or what I wanted to do, was think, what would it have meant or would it mean if they forgave me for that situation? And to me, like, that would mean the world if they forgave me for that. And I think they have, but it just is important to see, because I think before you can truly understand others' perspectives, you have to be aware of how you feel from that perspective. So it's hard to know what forgiveness would mean to someone if you don't know what that means to you. And I think for me, it was hard to think about forgiveness in that situation, just because forgiveness is a very special thing. Um, but yes, so then I wrote down things. I don't know if you have anything to add quite yet,
Um,
but
yeah, and I think in that situation, forgiving yourself is important too, you know.
yes. So I know, so kind of what I was get like where my thoughts ended up was, sorry, I have to read some of this because that's so what forgiveness, so asking what does forgiveness mean to them is also asking what would forgiveness mean to me, which is kind of what I already said. What would it mean to you, the audience, is what I meant by that when I wrote that. um if someone, so then another situation that always gets me emotional, but emotions are important and it's good to talk about, is like maybe a situation where, like what I thought was a situation where the person can like um uh sorry, it's the person cannot, like you'll never hear I forgive you from the person. So then I thought like, what do you do in that situation? And I think that's when it's important. Obviously, you have to learn to forgive yourself. And the reason that I thought like that was because, as we mentioned in Tuesday podcast episode, I was a nurse. So just during, and maybe other nurses can attest to this, but um, COVID was definitely not an easy time in the profession, and I think there was a lot of situations where, like, obviously everyone did the best that they could in with the given situation, but it just would have been a relief to hear like I forgive you, you know? Sorry. It's it's just, so then it's like with that situation where you will never be told I forgive you, but you have to learn to forgive yourself and move forward with yourself, if that makes sense. Um, because that was always something that and obviously I still hold on to it as you can see, but um, it's important to just like understand that you did everything that you could, and then that you did what was right and everything, and just forgive yourself in those scenarios. So I thought that that was important to get out there, is just sometimes you may never hear I forgive you, even if it wasn't anything that you did wrong, but it just would help you maybe move forward in a way. But sometimes you won't get that. So it's important to be able to forgive yourself for those perceived mistakes or mishaps or whatever it could be. But just learning to forgive yourself for those types of situations.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you said that because it almost kind of like it's the other side of what I was going to bring up, which is the way that a lot of people view forgiveness. Like, and there are definitely situations where part of the process of forgiveness is making amends, but there's also definitely like things that can happen where Like, you don't owe it to the other person to make the amends to forgive them. Because forgiving is really not letting the situation affect you any longer, is at least what I was told in therapy,
Yeah.
like by different therapists and everything. And like for me, like I grew up with a lot of abuse, and just learning that new definition of forgiveness has helped me to move on, and just kind of realizing that, like, you don't have to condone the actions of someone to forgive them, if that makes sense.
I think, oh yeah, okay. Sorry. I was like my brain
Mhm.
part. I was like, what does condone mean? But condone, like
Like,
you
say
don't,
it's okay, basically.
yeah, yeah. And I kind of and I had thought of that, like the forgiveness, like what if someone refuses to forgive you, forgiveness. But what I thought of in that case was you just like you have to accept, like we can't force other humans to do what we want. So if you want to hear I forgive, like you can't force that out of someone. So
Right.
in that case, you just have to accept that they don't forgive you, I guess, or you're not going to hear I forgive you from them. And that's okay. It sucks, but it there's nothing else you can't control other people, so you're not going to be able to control them to give it to you, but you have to learn to accept. And I think in that scenario, it's important to learn because as humans, we are going to make mistakes. That's just part of our nature. But the important thing is to learn from those mistakes. So even if someone doesn't forgive you, doesn't mean that you can't grow from that mistake.
Exactly.
And maybe they're just not at a stage where they feel they can forgive you either. And maybe in the future they will, but you can't hold on to that hope, like not hope, but it's just I wouldn't hold on to the possibility of them forgiving you either. Like hold out hope for that because that may never happen either. So I think what's important, in my opinion, is to learn from that mistake and then move forward with your life because you can't, it's not good to continuously live in the past. You got to keep moving forward with the future and building yourself like a better future in a way.
Yeah. And forgiveness is really hard too. Like, it's not something that happens overnight a lot of the
No.
time. I mean, maybe if it's something small, but for big things that happen to you, like, forgiveness can take years, even decades. It just depends, how open you are to healing, and, if you're willing to, take that challenge to heal. Because it is a challenge.
Oh yeah,
But it's worth
healing is a journey. And I don't even like obviously I would personally say I'm in the middle of my or not the I don't even know where I'm at in my healing because I don't even know if from my perspective maybe someone else is going to have a different perspective perception. I don't know if there is an end to healing because I think there's always something to heal from just as humans, but again, maybe eventually there will be a point in my life where I feel like fully healed, but I still think that there's always gonna like there's just things that we'll have to process, even if it's something that like let's say you get into a car crash tomorrow, like some people might think that that's like nothing, but to some people that means a lot and can throw them into like a spiral in a sense. So I think there's always something that, and that's when it comes down to understanding like your own emotions and your own reactions to scenarios and situations. So,
Yeah, like, I guess if I can tell one story about when I have to forgive somebody, one thing that comes to mind is when my ex-boyfriend cheated on me. I don't know if you remember that, but yeah,
um, I I don't know if I remember like they're talking about your most recent
My
ex?
most recent ex, yeah.
Was that here or in California? Or was that in?
He was in California.
Oh, okay, I think you like you definitely probably told me for sure.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was hard, but and then I saw, him, he was still logged into my Facebook. And so I saw him sending all the messages about, oh, my new girl has a nicer body than my old girl and all this shit. Like, and that was really damaging to my self esteem, obviously.
Yeah,
But, and it did take time. And I don't think I'm 100% of the way there yet. But I'm on good enough terms where, like, if he sends me a message, it's not going to put me into, like, catastrophe mode. It's not going to, like, ruin my day or anything.
yeah,
Like, it's just something I can move on from at this point. But, um, yeah. And I think one thing that helped me was I had a big support group at the time. Because I mean, I'll be honest about this. Like, I was living in a halfway house, so I had a lot of support at the time. I was around a lot of people who were very helpful to me. And I think that's important too, is like just for healing in general, is having a support group. Like it doesn't have to be an official support group, but like, just having a network of people that you can be open and honest with, and like having people that you can talk to about whatever you need to talk to
yeah. I would agree with that
or talk about. Yeah.
because I also think even let's like because you can for like I am like for me I'm like I don't know how to explain it the best way, so I'll just say it. I definitely forgive people, but I don't know if I can ever like forget a situation that happened. But I don't. But I also understand that everyone is human, so we're all gonna make mistakes. So I forgive people for any and just forgiveness in general. But it still like sticks with you, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like it'll
Yeah.
always be there with you, but for me, forgiving them, because I understand another part of forgiveness for me is always understand. Because I had another scenario I thought of in my head randomly one night was if somebody, like, obviously, this is just a made up scenario, and if I actually got stabbed, I don't think, but this was more so to speak about something. But if someone like stabbed you, and instead of obviously like screaming at them or being mad, like I then would have the character ask the person who stabbed them, like, "Are you okay?" Because a lot of times, what I've had to understand is when someone hurts you, it's because they're also hurting, and
Hmm.
that is where I used to be too. Because it's just I don't know, I can't really, and I'm not defending it either, obviously, but it's just hurt people. Um, so in that scenario, the obviously stabbing someone is never okay. Obviously, we are responsible for
Right.
our we are
Well,
responsible for our actions, no
and
matter what.
accountability is important for forgiveness too, I think.
Yes,
That's a
but
very
in that
integral part.
little scenario, I just thought it would be a good, I guess you could say, commentary maybe on the fact that if someone's hurting you, they're probably hurting too. So it would have been like me asking the stabber, like, "Are you okay?" And then them being like, "Well, I just stabbed you. What do you mean?" And I'd be like, "I know, but like, are you okay? Like, what's wrong?" Because obviously, and I'm not speaking overall for every person who stabs someone, because I don't know why, I don't know why people do that, but just in that scenario, is I'm just trying to add a commentary, not the actual situation, obviously, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I mean, even like, different like data and stuff will show that like, people who are, you know, violent or abusive, like have been abused themselves or have been hurt themselves
Yes.
in that type of way.
And even like when I was younger and bullied, not like intensely or anything, but um I because I think what I in turn like I think I built like a persona around that in a way that I pretended I didn't like care that but that is not about forgiveness. But um so it's about understanding now that I'm older and I can understand that they probably didn't maybe have good, and maybe they did have good, like it's you can never say for sure because I don't keep in touch with any of these people. I never talk to any of these people, but um I think I can accept what happened in a way and forgive it because I understand that most likely was coming because they were also experiencing that, like bullying in some form, whether it be at home or if in a different class they're being picked on, like bullies bully others in a way, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So like I can forgive that now. Like I can, like I'm able to process and understand that instead of, because I always would project it as, oh, something is wrong with me and that's why I'm being like signaled out and picked on, but it isn't about me. Like that's it's about like they're bullying me because of their own internal hurt, sadness, whatever's going on. It's not about me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. Like being, I was bullied too, and I mean, it did get bad at one point, but like just thinking that it was because of something I had done wrong or something wrong with me, when in reality, like, and especially looking back, I can really see it. Like, it was really just their pain, like them trying to cope with their pain and the way that they knew, even if it wasn't healthy or, a good thing to do. But
Yeah. Another thing that I wrote here that kind of deals with that was that maybe some people who struggle with forgiveness feel that they can't or aren't allowed to make mistakes, and so their reaction to someone making a mistake is how they perceive someone would treat them if they made a mistake. So again, that's where like another part of forgiveness, in my opinion, because I think a lot of times it can be hard to forgive when you don't also love yourself, because then that's kind of when that's when I would project like, oh, they were making fun of me for XYZ reason because those are my faults. That's what I thought was my faults. So it just made sense that that is why they would bully me. But again, that had nothing to do with me. And I think that comes from learning to like love yourself and know your own worth, because we're all worthy. Um, and it's just understanding that their reaction to you is an internal reflection of their own insecurities and their own self. And it's honestly sad. Like now that I'm older, I like feel bad when people are bullying others because I know that they're probably bullied. So it's just like a sad like realization situation.
yeah, or like they just don't have that confidence in themselves.
Yes. Yeah.
And so instead of, building people up, tearing people down is a good way of making yourself feel taller.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's they just because if you already feel down and then you see someone who maybe feels more full of themselves, or like full of themselves, but just like more confident in themselves and more happy with who they are as a person, you're going to want to tear that person down because you're unhappy and you feel like can't be happy for whatever reason. So instead
And
of working on that, then you may tear other people down in a way.
yeah, and then it makes, they feel less than that person who is happy because, like they don't feel like they have any way to be happy. And so to put themselves, higher up on a higher pedestal for themselves, like bringing someone down,
Yeah,
effectively does that for them.
I'm just reading my thing here to see if I. Yeah, because I. And another thing I realized is that, like we've said, hurt people hurt people. So then, what is, and for me, trying to heal from being a hurt person who hurts people, I tried to maybe internally, like questions that I ask myself is, what is hurting them back going to do? Will it actually make me feel better? Do I actually like hurting others? And then for me, obviously, I discovered no, I don't want to hurt others because why would I want to make people feel the way that I was feeling? Like, I don't want anyone to ever feel like that. Um, so that was just something that also helps me kind of that I've been learning because it's a process definitely. But that I've been learning and thinking about just to kind of try to not spread any more hurt. Like, just I don't want to tear, and they're already torn down if they're tearing you down. So, trying to tear them like trying to fight hate with hate isn't going to solve anything.
Yeah. And it just makes me sad because there's a lot of people, who have a hard time with forgiveness or, a lot of people who might tear people down and like they don't even have access to the help that they need. And so, like, I don't know, I guess trying to advocate or move for change where like more people can get access to help they need is important because like the more people around you are healed, the easier time you're going to have healing too,
Yeah,
and just the more connected and complete people can feel together, and the more positive like society can be.
yeah, I would agree with that. And I've also said I've like one thing that I personally have trying to be learning to do is to be more patient and compassionate and loving to not only strangers but myself because as I said earlier, the way we treat others is an internal reflection of ourselves. So if you're not patient or compassionate or loving towards yourself, then then you're not gonna be that way towards others. So it's also about just being loving yourself, giving yourself time, credit, um, for your achievements, and then also like patience too with yourself because you're human, you're still learning. So if you, because the one thing that I've also been learning is that we can't control our emotions, but like we said, you are responsible for your reaction. So anger, I can't control it. I'll feel it if I feel it, but it's about like just understanding that it's okay to feel that way
Mm-hmm.
and just being there for myself in a way and loving my and being like it's okay, you're not a bad person for feeling this way, but understanding that I can't attack someone else because like I can't just react impulsively to, and that's kind of what it is, and that's probably what, so again, therapy
Yes,
can help with, but if you don't have access then it's hard
but
to
even just
learn
finding
that.
like outlets and healthy coping skills, I think are really important too.
Yes.
Like, you're allowed to feel angry and you're allowed to release that anger as long as it's in a healthy way. I mean, you're allowed to do what you want, but like if you're trying to heal, like
Yes,
I
you
guess I would
you
say the rules for healing type of thing. I mean, there are no rules for healing, but that
but
recommendation.
I know what you're saying. Because yes, we do have the freedom. Like you can hurt people if you want, but then you are responsible for that. You can't hurt someone and then be mad when people hold you accountable for that
Exactly.
because you are accountable for your actions. I'm accountable for my actions. Anything that I, because I'm not going to pretend I've been a perfect person in my life. I haven't, but, and I'm accountable for things that I have done in my past. But I think I don't remember what I was going to say after that. But um, but yes, having healthy outlets for because you can't again control your emotions, so you can't pretend like oh I don't ever feel. And like I think that was a struggle that I felt was that I just tried to pretend the emotions weren't real, and I tried to feel like I could control the emotion or I could stop the emotion in its tracks in a way, but you really can't, or at least I can't. I have to allow the emotion to process. But I think one therapist that I went to also, or maybe it might have been in a book that I read this, that the emotion, give or take, and I don't know if there's much like science in a way behind this, but the emotion, give or take, lasts about like 60-ish seconds, I think is what I saw somewhere. I'd have to double check on that. But what then it passes. Like emotions aren't really like long. They don't last long unless you hold on to it in a way. So you kind of have to let it process. But when you try to repress it in a way, you are holding on to it because you're like fighting the anger. So you're in a way you're acknowledging that the anger is there, but you're pushing it down to try to fight it. So like
Right.
you're holding on to it in a way,
Yeah, and
if
you're not
that
letting
makes sense.
yourself release it. Yeah.
So for me, some I guess we can talk about out like I like writing. I feel like for me that's a good outlet. Singing, dance, just movement sometimes if depending on and it depends on the emotion too that I'm experiencing. But then I always think like what if sometimes it can be hard because what if you're at work and then like a boss does something that makes you upset? You can't. So like one thing that I thought was that I might be interested in trying out is like punching bag, because I feel like that's a really good physical activity. But obviously, if at work that happens, you can't. I mean, granted, I think emotions are important. So I think if someone needs to step away to process that emotion, I think you should be allowed to. But I understand in this society that we have created, that's you're not always given that option. So, I don't know if you maybe have some thoughts on how someone could
Oh
then
yeah.
process that emotion still, because you still don't want to repress it. You still need to acknowledge it and feel it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like when it comes to outlets and things like that, I'd say music is probably my biggest one, my biggest outlet. Be like writing songs, even if it's just for me,
Yeah.
just writing the song itself. Sometimes I might publish it if I really like it, but like I don't have to, and that takes the pressure off. And so I can just be creative and go free with that. And I think grounding is also important too when it comes to emotional regulation because sometimes I feel like I can get really lost in my emotions and like become ungrounded from reality in a sense and dissociate a little bit. Like things that help me with that, I like deep breathing. I used to not like it, but now that I've kind of gotten the gist of it, it really has been helping me. And there's the 5 4 3 2 1 method, which is you list 5 things you see, 4 things you hear, 3 things you can feel, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. I mean, it doesn't have to be those things in that order, but like just using your 5 senses to notice what's around you.
Okay. No, that's yeah, and I think that those are things that you could do at your job, um, like just to kind of ground yourself in that situation. Because the only other thing that I could think of to like offer in that scenario was like actually talking of like letting like having a discussion with your boss about how you feel, like
Yeah,
not necessarily how you feel, but like how they affected you because they are your boss isn't a better like there's
right.
no hierarchy. Like I know that we built this
It's a
structure
monetary
and
hierarchy.
yes, but
It's
it's not real.
it's not a hierarchy of personal value.
No. So you can let your boss know that you feel disrespected because they are responsible for the way they treat you. But if you're not comfortable, although we all like, I know that would always be hard for me to go up and because that's confrontation and not everyone is confrontational. Like I personally hate confrontation, but it also can be very important and because you also need to let people know that you aren't gonna necessarily like accept the disrespect either in a way. So, um, but again, it's always just keeping your like you got to do what's comfortable and best for you too. So whatever method that could be to help you would be the best.
Yeah,
But I think, yeah, I think that was. I mean, the other this like potential forgiveness that I thought also was can be a hard thing to do is forgiving like parents because
yeah,
I think sometimes we expect them to be perfect and to have all the answers and know how to because they're our parents. So and like at least this is my perception, my perspective. I've always been like, oh well, they're grown-ups, they're my parents, they should have all the answers if I have a question. They should be able to help me with every single issue I ever have. Yada yada yada. They should um have everything figured out basically. But I actually saw a TikTok. I don't remember who it's from, but just saying that this and this just helped me. This may not help others, but it basically said this is their first time being a parent. So that just like made me realize that it's not like they've had practice with and maybe if you're like the sixth kid, then you could say, oh well they've had five other kids to raise, so by now they should have it figured out. But in that same perspective, this is their first time raising a sixth child in a way. And I'm not gonna like this is not an excuse for bad parenting. Again, parents are responsible for their actions and how they have treated you. It just helped me kind of accept that they're not gonna have all the answers and obviously each situation is going to be different. But for me it just helped understand that this is their first time doing the parenting thing and this is my first time doing the children being a young adult thing, so it's just kind of a learning process I think, and even as you get older too, always learning.
yeah. I mean, I was lucky with my mom. It was, well, we used to fight when I was a teenager, but I was lucky in the fact that she got therapy, as did I. And we had family therapy and we were able to work through it together, which is really, like if you are able to have that discussion with your parents, have it because like it will like if you need to if you're able to. Of course, if it's not something that's safe for you or if
Yeah.
they've passed away or if you're in a situation where you can't do that, there are other ways to find forgiveness as well. But if you can, if you're lucky enough that you can have that conversation with your parents, as hard as it's going to be, even if you need someone to mediate it, like it's an important discussion to have because if you can have a close relationship with your parents, it's a very great thing if that's an option for you.
Yeah. Open dialogue is very important. And it can be hard because I feel like a lot of times it can feel confrontational, but you also have to just understand that it shouldn't really be like, I think the issue with feeling like things are confrontational is that they shouldn't feel confrontational. Like I shouldn't, because when you think about it, confrontational, to me, that would be feeling like my biggest concern with confrontation is that I'm going to be attacked by the other person. And I don't like, obviously, no one likes being attacked, but that should not be someone's first reaction. Like if someone comes up to me and is like, you really hurt my feelings, I shouldn't jump at them and be like, well, you did this, this, and this, like, so you need, like, that's what always scares me about having those open discussions, but they are extremely important because for you and for the other person as well, I think, if you can safely, like we said, but it's just that open dialogue is very important, but it takes time, and don't try to like force yourself or rush yourself into anything that's going to put you into a unsafe, uncomfortable situation. Like take your time, but if you can build up that ability to have those open discussions, open dialogue, then I think that is really helpful in the healing journey too.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think that's all I had on forget. Like for obviously, you could probably talk about for ages on forgiveness, but that was the main things that I wanted to say about forgiveness for this episode, I guess.
Yeah, I think we covered some good ground today.
Awesome. So
Yeah.
thank you guys again for taking time to hang out with us, I guess, in a way. And yes, so that's what we'll be doing on Wednesdays. Again, we might switch it up a little, maybe draw a card like when we're recording so that it's more raw, like more on, I don't know. We can do it whatever. You guys just let us know kind of what you thought. If you have any topics that you think we should discuss that you want to hear about or our thoughts on that we would be open to talking about for sure, let us know. But otherwise, thank you again.
Yeah. All right.